Hey, we're going to make a bit of a change now. We're going to have the founder of Agritecture coming up on board, up on stage. Also a board member for the Association of Vertical Farming. We have with us Henry Gordon-Smith. I'm going to let him explain what all that's about. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please make him feel welcome?
Hi, good afternoon. If you want to stand up and stretch, they say sitting is the new smoking, so get your blood going. You'll enjoy this presentation more. Come on. Get up, thank you. So, my name is Henry Gordon-Smith. I'm honored to be with you today here, visiting from Brooklyn, New York, to talk about vertical farming. Today, my job is really to jumpstart your knowledge of vertical farming and how it might apply to the Australian horticulture industry. So I'm going to go through an introduction so you get some of the basics, definition and some of the components of a vertical farm, some market drivers, a brief snapshot of the economics of a vertical farm, some case studies, some failures, and just some basic tips for how you can plan for success. My background is pretty varied. About 6 years ago, I started my blog, agritecture.com, because I couldn't find one resource to get all the knowledge about vertical farming and urban greenhouses. I co-founded the Association for Vertical Farming, a global nonprofit that standardizes the industry in 2013. And I started getting consulting requests. And so I started my consulting group, Blue Planet Consulting, and our focus is feasibility studies for vertical farms and urban greenhouses. I'm also a founding member of a collective of urban farms called the NYC Ag Collective. We have our annual event, NYC Ag Tech Week, September 16th to 21st. There's about 15 different farm tours and panels throughout 1 week in all 5 boroughs. And most recently, I started my new venture, AgTech X, which is a career accelerator for young people looking to get involved in the agricultural industry. You'll learn a little bit more about why I'm doing that coming up. It's always interesting to me how vertical farming kind of began in history, with King Nebuchadnezzar's wife expressing dismay with the desert life in Babylon, and an interest in developing a vertical farm called the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which used hydroponic systems. This is where the history of vertical farming comes from, a very futuristic, a very utopian vision of greening the city. And this is something that we've seen translate throughout the timeline of vertical farming. Speeding up a little bit, vertical farming was tested by DARPA in 2010 to grow different vaccines and tobacco plants. This basically optimized the growth of those vaccines and sped up the process significantly and allowed them to grow the vaccines year-round. In 2010, Dr. Dixon Dupamier, a friend of mine and a mentor of mine at Columbia University, published his book, The Vertical Farm. And what's interesting about that is that the utopian vision that's presented in his book launched an internet phenomenon on the subject. And it's still not unusual today that you'll meet vertical farmers who have started their farms based upon that book. Although that book isn't very technical necessarily, it does really demonstrate the future and how we might be able to have these vertical farming systems play into the ecological city. In 2012, some of the largest commercial vertical farms at the time farmed here, and Local Garden was in Vancouver, FarmTour was in Chicago. They opened up their doors and started producing leafy green vegetables and herbs in an indoor, stacked, closed environment. Both of those farms have now closed. I'll talk a little bit about that as well. In 2015, Aero Farms reached new heights with their investment, and as LED lighting efficiency has improved, we've seen the proliferation of vertical farms across the globe now. Our membership as a result has also grown with exciting new members including Philips Lighting, IKEA, Microsoft, and Metro Group. Many different groups are getting very excited about vertical farming and its applications. As you can see from this map, they're mostly in the northern hemisphere and slowly spreading southward. The majority of vertical farms today still remain in Japan. They've been involved in this technology for decades now, in the interest of growing a clean product that's radiation-free. That was the main market driver there. I'm always interested in the different market drivers for vertical farming. In Europe, it's really mostly about a consistent product and demonstrating technology leadership. As you can see from Wageningen University, there's already a lot of knowledge coming from there. In the United States, it's growing rapidly because the investment climate is quite positive there, as you heard from Michael Dean. So we define vertical farming as really kind of three-dimensional farming. It's about looking at your space three-dimensionally. The term has evolved from stacked levels of cultivation that Dr. Dixon Dupamier presented into really integration into buildings and spaces and urban environments. The major components include the structure for the growing systems, the hydroponic systems that grow the crops themselves, lighting, HVAC, the building shell that protects the systems, storage, processing, distribution, biosecurity, and automation. This is a new article that just came out recently, and I thought it was pretty interesting to read that there was a research that 78% of global consumers were going to be willing to pay more for local produce. So that local food trend is really what's driving this industry to pick up a lot more now. When you're growing in a vertical farm, you can grow the freshest product closest to the consumer near the city. It doesn't always have to be in the city. Don't think about vertical farms as skyscrapers in downtown areas. Think of them more as on the outskirts of cities in unused spaces and warehouses, or in unused spaces in urban areas like basements that have very little purpose. For example, in New York City, you're no longer allowed to put HVAC in the basement of a building in response to Hurricane Sandy. What are we going to use with those basement spaces? How are real estate developers going to make use of it? Vertical farming is one that is being considered. Trust and transparency is very important. We heard about food safety earlier today. In a vertical farm, you can control those variables and maintain a clean product throughout. Climate change is threatening the livelihoods of many farmers, and so going indoors and controlling all the variables has some benefits. Urbanization, over 50% of our population now living in cities. That's going to increase to 70% by 2050, they say. Real estate benefits, this is really creating an amenity, an additional value with your property. That's what vertical farming can do. LED efficiency, lighting has typically been the limiting factor for vertical farms, but it's improved so much now that we're beginning to see the economics for vertical farming improve year after year. And social entrepreneurship. Young people like me are getting excited about agriculture for the first time through this technology, and vertical farming resonates with us as we try to solve the world's global challenges. Can anybody tell me what this number is, what it means? This is the average age of the US farmer, or Australian farmer, excuse me. US, it's 58. So that's the average age of the US farmer, and so when we think about food security, we have to think beyond just growing enough food or distributing that food. We have to think about the next generation of farmers. And so when I see this number, I see a problem. I see a generation of lost farmers. And so how are we going to get those farmers excited, or young people excited about agriculture? Well, one way is going to be to give them opportunities to perform and work in agriculture closer to the city, where their friends are, where the best universities are, and where the opportunities of the city exist. In the United States, we also see that the size of US farms is growing rapidly, and the size of small-scale farms, or the number of small-scale farms, is going down. This is a problem and another signal. As I said, the average age is 58 in the United States. Another signal that young people are not pursuing urban or agriculture in general and starting new small farms. They don't really want to work for a large corporation necessarily or be a laborer. They want to start their own businesses. They want to impact society and the environment in a meaningful way. The picture on the right is Blue Planet Consulting's DIY open source farm called Plus Farm. And we released it at a Makers Fair, and we're excited to see how many young people were excited about this technology and have now taken it on themselves to build hydroponic systems at home and grow leafy greens for business purposes eventually. Heitz's law relates to LED lighting technology. So Moore's law relates to microchips, and LEDs are mostly microchips. And so what Heitz's law states is that year after year, as the efficiency of LED lights goes up, the cost is going down. This is really one of the major market drivers that's made vertical farming economically feasible today. I did a brief table of some of the other market drivers that we see. So water scarcity is a major one. I'm not going to go through all of them in the interest of time. Demand for local. Market penetration really refers to technology leadership. So as you can see, there are different drivers in different parts of the world. It's my belief that that makes the design of these farms different as well. Their size, their scale, the kind of approach that they use. Now, if we look at the Middle East region and North Africa, we can see that it's quite a wonderful climate for vertical farming for a number of reasons. I just recently worked on Australia, and I found some similar aspects. This is my first time to Australia, so I'm open to any challenges on that. I put a question mark in the market penetration side simply because I'm not familiar with how excited Australia is to get involved in leadership in this technology in particular. I've met a lot of leaders in horticulture in general today, but this is one thing to look forward to, is Australia interested in taking part in the market of vertical farming and its global applications? Certainly China is on the rise for vertical farming. There's really so many being built today. And so if Australia were to take on this technology in an active way, they would have something to export and strengthen that relationship further and make some money along the way. Here's some snapshot economics of one of the oldest vertical farms in the world, Maraiko in Japan. As you can see here, a lot of the costs go towards the building itself. These systems can be very, very capital intensive, as you can imagine, building all of that equipment. What you might also notice is that the investment return was in year 6. Most of the time you're looking at year 7, so it's really not quick money by any means. Now the number is improving, and again it does vary based on the size and scale of your farm. On the operations side, you can see that salaries and wages are still the highest number, along with utilities. In the United States, typically you'll see that the salaries will be closer to 35–40% of the operating costs. And so automation and its development is going to play a major role in the sustainable development of the vertical farming industry. The lighting challenge is being solved, as I said. The economics for that are improving every day, and we really do see a potential for easy use of lights in farms in the future. HVAC also makes up a big part of that. Usually utilities are split between those two costs, and HVAC needs a lot of improvement. There's a lot more innovation that's needed from mechanical engineers in its application to vertical farming. I'm going to begin with some case studies. This one is the most appropriate for Australian growers. It was my best attempt to find how vertical farming might apply in South Australia. Shenandoah Growers is the largest US herb grower, and they have moved towards vertical farming. I put these data points in here because this is what the grower himself claims. I invite you to watch the video on Fluence or on YouTube. You can just search Shenandoah Growers. Essentially, they were a greenhouse, large greenhouse. They didn't have any more space to grow, so they decided to turn their nursery into a vertical farm. They have their nursery, their young plants growing kind of on the typical carts that you would see, and then they place lights kind of into structures with plumbing that then they would put those nursery plants into, the young plants into. They would grow in a completely controlled environment, and then they would move them out to the greenhouse to finish their growth. They saved 75% in land, 60% reduction in fertilizer, and they were able to do that nursery production better year-round. So it's a great application for nursery growers, a great application for greenhouse growers that are looking to get more control and increase the success of their plants. And that's one case study I invite you to look at further. In Singapore, where vertical farming has picked up a lot, Sky Greens is one of the oldest farms there. This is kind of a greenhouse application for vertical farming that's not LED lit. So the inventor there, Jack Ng, he developed this system, which is based on a medieval water wheel technology. And so soil-based planters will rotate up and down an A-frame. They'll dip into the nutrient solution. And each of those towers only uses about the power of a typical incandescent light. So this is an interesting approach here. They've expanded to about 3 hectares of greenhouse production in Singapore and are making a significant impact on that city-state's food security. AeroFarms, you might have heard about them in the news. They've raised a lot of money for this industry, and they are expanding now. They are what you would call the typical vertical farming model, where they've converted an unused space in a bit of a real estate play. They're producing jobs locally, a significant number of jobs in New York, New Jersey. And they grow year-round using aeroponics, a highly precision-focused form of hydroponics. They have a number of sizes of systems. This is the one that's imaged here. And this is really has a potential for great success in the United States and other parts of the world where there's unused warehouses after industries have failed. They've literally taken these unused spaces, and now they're growing millions of pounds of produce inside of them. So keep an eye on AeroFarms for sure. Farm 1 was one of our clients. It's the first commercial vertical farm in Manhattan, and it's a great example of how you can make money off a small vertical farm. Rob Lang, who's actually an Australian entrepreneur, came to New York City with his interest in being a home chef in the past, and decided to start this vertical farm. And he wanted to grow rare culinary herbs, the kind of herbs that high-end consumers in New York and high-end chefs demand, and they'll order from anywhere in the world. But he was going to grow them locally in Manhattan. They now serve Michelin star restaurants, totaling 10 Michelin stars, and are scaling up to their second facility, which is 7 times the size of this one. Got cut off there. Square Roots Urban Growers is Kimball Musk's latest project. Kimball Musk is Elon Musk's brother and has a keen interest in vertical farming and specifically the real food movement. This is an example of shipping container farms. So the business model is that they have 10 entrepreneurs. Each entrepreneur gets a shipping container and they have 1 year to start their local food business. This is them jump-starting the local food movement in Brooklyn, and I'm sure that they'll expand across the country with this idea. So with the shipping containers, there's a lot of potential for this kind of modular approach. For an accelerator model like this, it makes a lot of sense. Some of the challenges with shipping container vertical farms is that you have to get individual equipment for each one, and so their carbon footprint is quite significant. As a result, their HVAC costs are also more significant. There are also some labor challenges with farms of that size that I can discuss with anyone afterwards. Urban Produce in Los Angeles, or just south of Los Angeles in Irvine, California, is an interesting model. They grow microgreens. They've done one of the things that's really smart. You can't really compete with the same product in vertical farming. You must create a new product. And so what they've done is they grow their produce, these microgreens rather, in the packaging itself. They've also innovated in the sense that they have a rotating system that goes through a light tunnel. As you know, microgreens don't need too much light anyway, but this way they've saved on the lighting costs, the lighting capital costs, and they've also saved on the space. As you can see, they don't need lights between each layer here. Interesting project. Vertical farms are now moving into stores, and I'm sure you'll see them around you soon. So these are not really commercial applications of it, but for your retailers there, you might be interested that both Target and IKEA and, in this case, Metro Group, are investing in integrating vertical farming into their retail shops. Obviously, this isn't going to feed all the consumers, but it does inform the consumer of where the crops come from and of these new technologies. It excites them, and it kind of creates a sort of amenity for when you're visiting the store. This German individual is very interested. It's not all sunshine and butterflies. I don't want to give you any illusions. These are 4 commercial vertical farms that are not so old that have failed, or shut down at least. Briefly, Hort essentially didn't know were they a technology company or were they a grower. I would equate that to their reason for not succeeding. Local Garden didn't listen to their customer. They were focused on packaging salad mix at wholesale instead of focusing on their retail market. They were directly downtown in Vancouver. Farm Tier was maybe too close to the city for their size, and so was paying higher real estate costs than they needed. They also experimented with aquaponics and aeroponics before settling on hydroponics, and lost a lot of money through R&D as a result. Verticulture simply couldn't get the investment they needed with an aquaponic model, which I don't typically recommend at a commercial scale. So, my basic tips for you: do you want to be an operator or do you want to be a technology company? There's a place for both of those in the vertical farming space, but you need to decide. Like has been talked about earlier by a number of speakers, you have to do your market research. If the market doesn't want your product, then there's no point in building a farm that's going to cost you millions of dollars. Pilot. One of the things we recommend to all of our clients is to start with a pilot. You can play around with the idea of 10% of your space. That space and that system should reflect the larger system. Why are you piloting? Because you need crops to actually give to your customers to get them excited about your product and to get them to sign the LOIs that they're going to buy the whole amount of product once your system is full. It's going to help you get investment, and you also need to optimize your food safety and your labor management in the pilot stage. As I said, you need to create a new product. Don't think about competing with the same product. Try to create a new product that's going to excite the customer and get them excited and interested in the local food movement, because that's what you have to offer, is fresh and local. And then make sure that you have a backup plan. This is really about developing an R&D budget. If you're a vertical farmer, you're not just a grower. You're involved in the technology one way or the other. And if you haven't prepared yourself for some of the challenges you're going to face and some of the R&D that's required, you're going to run out of money quickly. And if you've done all of that, then it's time to invest in vertical farming. If you're interested in the subject, you can follow my blog, Agritecture, on all social media platforms. We have over 6 years of data and knowledge and news reports on vertical farming across the world. On the archive, you can search by photo, video, or what kind of post you want. Thank you so much for your time.